Black and British by David Olusoga. The issue that continued to cause the deepest ruptures in Britain was interracial relationships and marriages. Some people still subscribe to the pseudo-scientific ideas that had emerged from the racial eugenics of the early 20th century, which suggested that mixed-race children were mentally deficient or prone to other congenital defects. The notion that the children of racially mixed marriages inherit the worst features of both races still lingers. Mixed-race children were seen as a social problem, regarded by some as being neither one thing nor another. Banton wrote, "Mixed blood populations often are in a precarious position, born into poverty and raised among the disinherited. They are ill prepared for the difficult role they have to play."
It's been a year since Black Lives Matter. That is of the second wave. That one that forced so many to say, "I'm an ally." Was there really any other way? Black squares littered profiles. It seemed like the world was finally ready to defile the purest of structures where whiteness defines brightness. "We'll stand by you," said those embarrassed to say otherwise. Apparently the system was invisible to their white eyes, but now the world has seen yet another black man die. On TV, on repeat, they could no longer hide behind ignorance. So Black Lives Matter was said, by every mouth that considered themselves left. Many of the right too, because racism is dreadful. It's dread. And I'm full to the brim with that phrase. Hearing it whilst watching the same lazy behaviour, I saw it clearest in those who were closer. Couldn't unsee it, even when I was supposed to. Because that's what a good little mixed race girl does. Educate the ignorant relatives, gain their trust. If you want an invite to weddings, you have to keep your mouth shut. Acceptance is half the battle. Be the half that's easier for them to handle. A year since the world said they cared about black lives. Some of them were scared. Some of them lied. Some of them would never be challenged. And some of them cried. A year since Black Lives Matter, when the performer inside me died enough to see the cracks she was hiding from the ones she once called family. Isolation peeled away illusion in layers. Lukewarm love traded for fake smiles. Promises of change wrapped up in denial, and in the middle of it was a tiny child who wanted desperately to belong. Who tried her hardest for 30 years to be strong. To be the shining example. Not like the others, to be the one they could be proud of, despite her colour. But she would never be protected, never be saved, by adults who knew better but didn't have to behave until Black Lives Matter exposed their ways, and now the child is expected to pick up the pieces again. A year since Black Lives Matter, and nothing's changed, except family became relatives, and I stopped taking the blame. This is a spoken word piece I wrote recently. My name is Ngaio Anyia. I'm an artist and creative, and I thought it was a really good way to introduce this podcast where I'll be looking at the experience of mixed race people. The mixed race experience has been incredibly complex over the last year since Black Lives Matter, the second wave, as I said, and I really wanted to put together something that contextualized this huge conversation around identity and belonging, one that isn't really had that openly. Everyone's been talking a lot about what it is to be mixed race since the Meghan Markle effect on the royal family. It's become a bit of a buzzword, but actually the experience of it can be confusing. So in this podcast, this is looking at specifically people who come from mixed race backgrounds, of coming from a black parent and a white parent in sort of very specific racial terms, because with all of the history that comes behind it comes an extra layer of complexity. And this podcast was put together to try and look at some of those complex feelings and delve into how different everyone's experience can be and look at some of the context around what it is to be mixed race. There are pieces read out from some of the books that I've been reading recently on the subject. Those are Black and British, Biracial Britain, Loud Black Girls, which have all been really useful to compound what I've been thinking and also to have new perspectives. And I've also enlisted some interviews with a couple of friends of mine. One being Aisha Regala, talking about her relationship with her partner. They're in an interracial couple and have just had their first child. So I talked to her about considerations that they had as a couple before breeding, as she phrases it. And I also speak to Annabelle Wilson about her PhD, Reading and Resisting Racialized Misrecognition, an exploration of race script, epiphany moments and racialized selfhood, which was published in February 2021. There are some spoken word pieces in here that I wrote as far back as 12 years ago. Some of them are fairly recent. Some of them were one of the first pieces that I ever wrote. So it's all linked to identity. It's all linked to the journey that I've been on. In terms of understanding of myself, understanding of the spaces that I'm in and why they've made me feel the way that they do, and trying to bring a little bit of understanding to some things which feel like they could never really be explained. The mixed race journey is a journey for sure, and I think over the last year with the pandemic and with Black Lives Matter, it's been a really testing time for a lot of us. Mixed race people are often seen as the bridge, and it can be really hard to be the bridge between two spaces that fear each other. So yeah, I wanted to put this together to help bring some context to the conversation and maybe a little bit of clarity. So please enjoy. It's not the lightest piece in the world, but I hope it will be informative. I hope that it will be interesting, and there are some laughs in there, and there's a couple of songs too. So yes, please enjoy, and thank you to everyone who's contributed to this. Also, Ifemi, Will, Ben, and Tom, and all the other people I've managed to wrangle into having a listen to it before it went out into the world. Phoebe Park, Loud Black Girls. Clumsy labels and why I cling to mine. A label can be useful in some ways. As a child, it helped me identify myself and understand where I had come from. My mother is black, born in Jamaica. My father is white, born in England, and I was a mix of the two. My skin colour kind of halfway between the two. Hair texture sort of a mix of the two. Understood. I found security in the label of mixed race, mainly because no one was likely to tell me that I didn't belong in that category. Growing up, and even sometimes now, I was jokingly told that I needed to embrace my black side when I come up short on some arbitrary metric. And at school, I couldn't always relate to my white classmates who bonded over shows I wasn't allowed to watch and hairstyles I could never hope to replicate. I've never taken any of this too seriously, and I realised that being confused about my identity wasn't just because of my ethnicity. Nonetheless, I still cling to my mixed race label because it feels like a crude, but safe, rubber ring.
Race scripts are the product of cumulative knowledge gained through first-hand experiences, observation, books, training, and social interactions, and underpin people's understandings of racialization processes.
Like the whole PhD is kind of looking at what we learn at home within our families and how we apply that outside of our homes, and how what my parents teach me about race or what my family teach me about race informs what I learn about race when I'm out there on my own. I'm learning about where I fit. So the racialized misrecognition part is referring to like this collective racialized system that gives meaning and power to race and racial categories. And the resisting part of that is about the way that people firstly come to know about the way that they're categorized as a result of how people respond to their appearance or to their race. And I'm doing quotation marks because you can't see me. So it's about how people navigate and live with the reality of racialization, which is something that, is kind of beyond and out of their control.
One comes to understand the complex, multifaceted cultural significance of the race and how this often results in a gap between how one sees oneself and how one's seen by others.
Everybody has their own way of knowing and coming to know and understanding race. But this is all a part of a much bigger and broader system that we're all a part of. And so mixedness is confusing because race is constructed as being quite black and white. Do you know what I mean? Or white and other. And because, as we know, race is a construct, it doesn't really make sense. It's not like it's a fiction. It's a very well thought out and put together fiction that comes across and seems to be very, very real. So when we try to make sense of what's actually in front of us, we can get confused, or our minds are a bit distorted by what we think race really is.
People of mixed black and white heritage often develop skills of self-analysis from the onset. When they encounter for the first time the experience of being made through the eyes of another due to their race, they begin to undergo a process of stepping outside themselves to understand how their bodies are perceived in the social world.
I thought by showing the different ways that people understood race, somewhere along the line, I'd be talking to lots of different people to kind of explain to them why you might be having a disagreement with someone who's saying, no, you don't understand, you embody whiteness, you'll never know where I'm coming from, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to really break down the ways that within a family, so within the most intimate space, there are all these different understandings of what race means, which connect to these individual people within this family's own life experiences, and most importantly, how they are positioned racially, or challenge the assumption that race is a commonly understood concept, but actually it's something that is very different because it's so connected to how you see, it's so connected to your perception, it's so connected to your own life experience and how you see the world. You understand how racialization works in your everyday life. Everybody does. They might not call it that word, but how does race matter? In what ways does it matter? When I walk into this place, when I go to this place, what does it mean when I'm at home with my family? What does it mean when I'm with my black family, my white family? Like, you learn about these things in your everyday interactions, So I'm just kind of in this thesis picking out the lessons that you learn in those spaces that you internalize and think that's really important. And then how you shift your behavior either in response to that, like unconsciously, or you consciously are playing with that and understand that as something that you need to consider in the way you act and interact with others.
The effect of race on the transmission of family norms across generations is more apparent within mixed race families, as greater differences in experiences of racializations are brought together within a kin network of family field. Within mixed race families, you have a black side of your family and a white side of your family. And the white side of the family are not going to see themselves as being racist when they have a mixed race person in the family. Obviously some might, that's a very big generalization, but a lot of people are going to think, well, I love you, or well, you're a part of my family, or you've always been around, and how could I possibly be racist? But it is that, isn't it? It's not just the complicity, it's the thinking of how much performance is being done for you, even inside the family.
And it's interesting what you say, because it's true. And I think people somehow think like that love could overcome racism, for example. Like, it's not enough, you can love me completely and you could die for me. Do you know what I mean? You could go out of your way and feed me and sacrifice and do all these things. Do you know what I mean? But at the same time, you could really play a part in this kind of structure, this racial structure, and you might love me, but then you have these kind of other kind of views and opinions and perceptions around what race means and what your whiteness means. And you're probably not aware of the extent to believe your whiteness is of greater value than my blackness. But somewhere in there, because the world around you supports you to think that way, right? You've been taught to think that way unless you go and make a huge effort to deconstruct the unconscious ways in which you understand race and that race benefits you in the world and things, there's a huge chance that you may be, despite your love for me, reproducing the conditions that make me different from you.
White mothers learn to mother across coloured lines. Some mothers find ways to use their own privileges, whiteness and middle classness, to protect their children from the damaging processes that racialization can have upon their self-esteem, self-worth, ambition, drive, and happiness.
To give an example, so if we take the mothers first, so there's 5 families in the study, there's 5 mothers. So there's one Black mother, and I talk about how within that family, a lot of the work surrounding how you survive living in a kind of racist society is kind of, I say, done unspoken. It's a lot through actions. It's a lot through people ain't going to like you, but you keep going. Yeah, it's going to be hard, but you keep going. And you don't dwell. It's not overly discussed. We're not going to sit down and have a conversation about what racism is and what race is. We are just going to live. We are going to know that we have these challenges and we're going to keep going. And most importantly, we are all here. We've got your back. We understand the system, and let somebody touch you and see what we do. We are a family, a Black middle class family that has resources, that knows how to speak the language, that aren't afraid to push for our family members. So you have that family. Then you have kind of 2 white middle class mothers who used to talk about, who are kind of more into real educating their children about race. So yeah, you have 2 middle class moms. One of them specifically is like the education around how you survive a racialized world is very race specific. They are very much into empowerment and encouraging their child to lead their own research and develop their own strategies and kind of see themselves more in the background as like, I will help you advocate, but you will advocate for yourself kind of approach. The other approach is like, this is the education, racism, or just all the like sexism, like everything are kind of the same thing, the same issue. And we can kind of conflate, like we can flatten these because that is prejudice and prejudice means this. And ultimately we don't need to listen to that. We just need to be accepting of difference. And if people were accepting of difference, it would be okay. So there's that kind of approach, and that's kind of deep within the teachings. And then you have the kind of more difficult relationships, one where a white mother won't speak about race because they don't feel like it's their expertise. So they kind of don't want to talk about it because they don't really see why they should, and they don't really know, and they can't really relate to them on that level. And it's not that they don't care, it's just, you probably should talk to your dad about that, not me. Because I don't really have anything to say. I'm not qualified to discuss the issue of race because I'm white. And then you have the other parent who is like, I am 100% anti-racist. Like I'm actively anti-racist, but like my son's not like those Black people that you see on TV. No, not those Black people. No, my son's very different from those Black people. And I know like he doesn't listen to hip hop. No. I mean, he's Black, but he's got blue eyes. There's a lot of kind of unconscious anti-Blackness that is kind of like deeply within her, that she's always trying to prove that her kids aren't like that, as all of us kind of want to do. But in doing so, she kind of reinforces the fact that Blackness is kind of a little bit bad in a way, and that's really difficult for the children within that family.
Don't call me a racist. I've never used the N-word. I'm not a fucking racist. Don't be absurd. How could I be racist? You're frankly obsessed, fallen out with everyone I heard.
Fragility flares like a flame, destroys any discussion, burns it into shame, derails any questions. To ask would invite blame.
I absolutely cannot, will not, hear that horrid word again. How dare you bring this discomfort to our door, confuse our children, talking of wounds we never saw. Out of sight, out of mind, seen once a year, and even then we were kind, even though we didn't have to be. You were lucky to see a glimpse of this silver spoon. Most don't get the option, won't have a life like you. You're one of the lucky ones, and we allow you to stay, as long as you keep your mouth shut and play our loyalty game. We dictate your story here, allow a future if you forget the past. This was your burden to carry. It has nothing to do with us. You want people to blame, but I'll tell your parents the same. Finger pointing with a sanctimonious smirk. This is why interracial couples don't work.
There is nothing a privileged white man hates more than being told the score by a black woman.
Sir Ralph Williams explained to the Times that interracial marriages were bound to lead to social tensions, as in the minds of most Britons, such unions were repugnant.
Every one of us,
He wrote,
has probably many friends among the coloured people, whom we bear in our kindliest remembrance. Hostility to interracial relations does not, either I think, arise from any feeling of social superiority. The cause is far deeper. It is an instinctive certainty that sexual relations between white women and coloured men revolts our very nature.
The warmth and hospitality that had characterised the war years evaporated. Many children were abandoned by their mothers, who had themselves been ostracised by their communities and even families. Most were sent to children's homes, from which very few were successfully placed for adoption. Furthermore, Britain's politicians were worried about how it would look to non-white peoples of the colonies if Britain demonstrated herself incapable or unwilling to care for and educate mixed-race children, and saw the only solution to be their mass deportation. Mississippi Congressman John E. Rankin expressed his rabid opposition to bring into this country, quote, a lot of illegitimate half-breed Negro children from England, whose mothers, he said, were the scum of the British Isles.
Hi.
Hello.
So Morgan is white British.
He is.
You're British Ghanaian.
I am.
How was that beginning of the relationship with you guys?
I mean, we were young, so we met in the pub, and it all just happened fairly quickly. I think we had moved in together certainly within 8 weeks of knowing each other. It,
Wow,
it progressed
8 weeks.
really, really quickly. It's a long time ago now. We've been together 10 years now. So, but yes, it was quick, but we were young. We were very young and very idealistic. I do remember us looking for a flat. I think we'd been together maybe a year and a half then maybe, and we were walking through St Paul's because we were going to visit, we were going to view a property there, and there were a lot of stairs, fine, and I remember a guy sort of saying, I can't remember exactly what he said to Morgan, but something about leave our women for us, or something, of that
Ilk.
of that ilk, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think most interracial couples will have experienced some level of interesting views. So yeah, I mean, but it's on the whole, it's been fine. It's been interesting in other countries, I would say, but on the whole, in Britain, it's been fine.
Yeah, because you went to Prague. Was that the honeymoon?
No, it wasn't a honeymoon. We were just there on holiday. Never again. There's a perception that as a black woman with a white male, that you're a prostitute. Lovely, fine if I was a sex worker, but I'm not. It's not so far-fetched that he may not be paying me to be there. So that was interesting. We had a lot of sort of horrible stares. You can tell the difference between a genuine sort of interest stare, and a that is disgusting stare. And when we'd go to bars, I remember we were at a bar and we were sitting outside, and you could order your drinks and they'd bring it to your table, but for us, we had to pay up front, whereas the tables next to us could order their drinks and pay before they left. So, and I can't imagine it was because he's a white man. So, yeah, I mean, it's incredibly beautiful. Definitely visit if you're white. But yes, it was an interesting experience. Morgan found it really difficult. I think there's an element of, so even if you remove race from it, I think there's a masculinity that comes out when you feel that the person that you love is potentially being harmed in some way. So I think regardless of the situation, men naturally get all sort of, protective. So it was hard. It was hard, but we had a great time in our room. No, not. Let's take that back. Let's take that back. That's what I meant. But
Enough said.
That is not what I meant. I went in the apartment, chilling, just the two of us, reading books, playing games, that sort of thing.
Sure. Play games. Sure.
Terrible human.
Mixed race relationships are no longer an exotic rarity, but the new normal.
A Daily Telegraph headline read in November 2017 in response to Meghan and Harry's engagement. Not quite. Scholars have been documenting interracial relationships in Britain since at least 1578, according to research by Chameleon Caballero and Peter J. Aspinall. They quote Captain George Best, who commented that he had
seen an Ethiopian as black as coal brought to England, who, taking a fair Englishwoman to wife, begat a son in all respects as black as the father.
The book Mixed Race Britain in the 20th Century goes on to explore how common interracial relationships continue to be in Britain. The author Philip Thicknesse, 1778, complained that in
every country town, nay, in almost every village, are to be seen a little race of mulattoes, mischievous as monkeys and infinitely more dangerous.
Before you guys were having kids or anything, did you have discussions about Morgan's understanding of race? Or
Oh God, we had so many discussions. The thing is, it's a big thing. Marrying someone is one thing. Breeding is another.
Breeding.
Yeah. So me personally, I think it's really unhelpful, silly, naive if you are in an interracial marriage relationship and you don't have those discussions, because a child will open you bare to the world. Those discussions will come out in the end, and if you don't have them before, I believe that's unreasonable. So yeah, we had multiple discussions. I mean, the biggest one was around the fact that we would have a black son. Now, I know there'll be lots of people that say, well, no, your son's not black, he's mixed race. Okay, fine. But in the eyes of society, okay, he has a proximity to whiteness, but he will never be seen as white. Never. So if you've got, it's mixed race people are definitely seen as being more black, because I don't know why. And so the discussions around bringing up a man who society views as black, so bringing up a black man without having a black father, and actually what that discourse would be like, and what we would need to do as parents to ensure that our child or children felt whole. And living in Bristol, my family live in London. I'm very blessed that my brother lives in Bristol too. But when, before we married, my brother didn't live in Bristol. So it was very much my fears were that the family is all white, and what that would mean for our children growing up. and whether what we would need to do to make sure that there was a balance there. And that balance doesn't mean just taking them to Ghana every year. That's, you know, that's a given. They'll go to Ghana every year. But it's about actually ensuring that they understand their heritage, ensuring that they really understand what it means to be them. And there are certain things that Morgan can learn, but he will never know.
Yeah.
And it's important that's discussed before you have a child. And it's a hard discussion. It's a hard discussion because, you know, it's your offspring. But the fact is, it's not going to be as simple as if you had a white child. It just isn't.
Moderating blackness demands emotional restraint, ignoring or not reacting to racism, and the perceived ability to get on with white people. Everyone has their own ideas of what it is to be mixed race, of what it feels like, of the opportunity, of the struggles. And in between it is can be a real search for belonging and claiming who you are for you. I wrote Blackbird when I had just watched the video of Sandra Bland being killed when the first wave of Black Lives Matter. And I saw myself in her. I saw myself in someone who was saying, why should I get out of the car? Why am I being treated differently? Why am I not being treated with the same equal rights as you would treat someone else? Why? And she was killed for that. Black women's voices are so often ignored, even though they are hypervisual, hypersexualized. That so much more is expected of Black women, and yet they are still so disrespected. So I wrote Blackbird as a note to myself, to the women who have made me who I am, to my Black and my white side. And it was really a song to ask people to listen to the Black women in their lives. They are so often turned to when they are needed in times where people want strength and answers and to be led to some sort of a mecca of understanding, and yet they are still so disrespected. So Blackbird is that. It opens with, picture me flipping through memories. There have been so many times over the years where I have kept quiet and I have not said the things that I needed to in order to protect other people. But whilst I'm protecting other people, they're very rarely protecting me. And I don't think that is something that I alone experience. So that is where Blackbird came from. Picture me flipping through memories that you cannot see. They catch focus outside of me. 'Cause this is, it's not what it was meant to be. Meant to be. When you look around your world, do you see the inequalities? But I'm labelled BAME to keep me boxed easily. We talk about equal opportunity, but when I walk through the door, there's no one representing me. So how did we get to this place? I should feel grateful, but I feel disgraced. How did they get away with this? A facade of multicultural looking down on brown Brit-ish who you are happy to let fight for you. And what? Am I mistaken? To be angered by how few steps we've taken. Tick the boxes that you need. Shake the hand of a BAME to be that guy you want people to see as being colorblind. You think you're colorblind? Do you you want me to decipher my DNA? Explain my skin pigment, class and grade. I'm mixed race, that's how I look like this. My mixed race is what defines my waist and my lips. You're mixed race too. You're mixed race too. Your ancestors speak Gaelic, Scottish, French, Dutch, German, Greek, bruv, you could be Dutch. But when you stop identifying with your identity, that's when you snap focus onto differences that you see. And instead of celebrating our collective diversity, you start talking about benefit thieves and border security. This is the world that you live in. So sit down, shut up, and be grateful that you can't see the shackles. Be grateful that this time they're hidden. This time they're hidden. Picture me flipping through memories that you cannot see. They catch focus outside of me. 'Cause this is, yeah, it's not what it was meant to be. Meant to be. 'Cause if a blackbird falls out of the sky, did we lie? Oh, when a blackbird falls out of the sky, did we lie? Oh, when a blackbird falls out of the sky, did we lie? Did we lie? Did we lie? Oh, did we lie? Did we lie? Did we lie? Blackbirds fall, blackbirds fall, blackbirds fall, blackbirds fall, the blackbirds fall, blackbirds
Roughly half of Britain's mixed race population is of mixed black and white heritage, and there's no relationship quite like the relationship between black and white. The history of slavery, colonialism and racism combined with a persistently huge power imbalance in the present, mixed with a very specific psychological dynamic. To be born to black and white parents is to have to navigate this difficult dynamic, to be thrust in between two worlds that often fear and mistrust each other, that often see themselves as vastly different from each other, that sometimes even openly resent each other. In this no man's land is a child trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in, trying to make sense of it all.
It's an ongoing conversation, even so much as things like, actually, are there any black Saturday schools in Bristol that we can send our children to? How are we going to ensure that they've got equal access to black authors when we're reading them books? How we go, all of these things are, to me, not something you should have when you're pregnant.
Yeah.
They should have happened before, because if there's discourse between you, maybe you should consider whether that's the right thing for you to do, whether having a child is actually right for the two of you. Because for me, having a child was way bigger than anything else in life. People say whatever you do, you're always going to mess up your child. That's what they say, But I think if you can try to at least think about what they may encounter and how you may approach that situation, it's important. But it's also important just with regards to how you communicate with each other.
Yeah.
Learning how to communicate with each other is, to me, a part of how your relationship grows. So all of those conversations start in a very basic way when you might have been dating for a few months, but they become deeper and they become, I guess, more... You're more likely to open yourself fully to those conversations the longer you've been together. So yeah.
I think as well, if it's sort of framed in a way of, like, say, like what your child's going to encounter, like what he's growing up around, what he's going to see, who he's going to be influenced by. Actually, these things start so young. And I think a lot of the time, the conversations around race, in my experience, has been with a lot of white people who are bringing up kids sort of going, I don't want to have to put race in their lives too early.
Yeah.
And for me, it's always been a case of, well, that's cool for you because they might not encounter racism early, but actually if you do have a child who isn't white, there's a chance they're going to encounter that a lot earlier than you would want them to.
Yeah.
And actually when that happens, there does need to be a sense of being prepared or having prepared them so that they know that they can come and talk to you about that conversation when it happens.
Lawrence Hirschfeld argues, and I quote, that children do not learn about race because it is evident. They learn that it is supposed to be evident because it is governed by hidden but crucial processes.
A lot of people do experience their first sort of aspects of racialization young, like really young, like 2, 3, 4 years old. So while you're learning about the world is telling you what you need to be learning about yourself. And so if you don't have these tools to be able to recognize it as something that's external, it's really difficult. And also it's hard to call out because, like that quote says, like it's governed by hidden processes, but they're crucial. So children know that they're there. Everyone knows that they're there. They know that it means something, but no one's talking about it. So
exactly. They're in the TVs that children watch. It's all of these messages because it's within what we call the field of like power, the politics, the kind of field that intersects all fields that says in this society, this means whiteness means excellence, or it means more than blackness. And these two things need to exist because one gives the other power. So the existence of blackness gives power to whiteness and enables blackness to be an inferior thing. But that is so deeply embedded into people's psyches and so a part of what they produce, whether that be research to understand that exact thing, or depending on where they're coming from, or storybooks for kids. Like it's so within us. And unless you're consciously doing something about that, you're probably in some way or another reproducing it. Well, you are. Yeah.
Racism is often discussed today as if it is a phenomenon unique in human behaviour, but far from it. Racism is just one of the countless ideologies humans have developed to dominate other humans. Racism is not the result of prejudice, but of the capacity to dominate. The prejudice exists to justify the domination. Many religions have ended up ultimately feeding this human need for domination, as have economic systems built on the idea of some people possessing royal blood, whatever that is, or ethnocentric ideas that say we may be the same skin colour, but I am better than you because I'm from ethnic group X and you're from group Y. The most pressing question I see is not why racism exists, but whether we are capable as humans of weaning ourselves off our addiction to these feelings of power and domination. Because if not, we will continue inventing all sorts of new ideologies in our search for that high. Racism will simply be replaced by something else.
Do you know what I think about a lot? I think about when I was about 12 and my parents were talking to us about racism. And I had the absolute audacity to say, it's not a problem now.
At 12.
Okay. Can you imagine?
Don't worry, guys.
It's solved, okay? The issue has been solved. It's an issue for you. I mean, God, stop going on about it. It's not an issue for us now. Just what, Aisha? What? Just, it's so crazy that when you're young, not crazy, it's when you're young, I don't think you understand the microaggressions. They're just a part of your experience growing up. I don't think, always have the understanding of the world, understand why certain things are happening. But I absolutely think it is a privilege to say, I don't want to discuss race with them yet. I don't want them to see colour. God help me.
How race works depends on the space in which it's playing out. So race and space are very interconnected concepts. Race isn't what's inside our bodies. Race is built into the structure of things, right? Into schools, into communities, into towns, events. Like it's not just skin. People will think that race is just us and it's about us as people, but actually the world we live in is designed to privilege whiteness. Okay? Spaces where their whiteness have more expensive houses, have less crime. Like spaces are designed with race in mind. Spaces give meaning to race, not just people.
Because I think you describe it as fields, don't you?
Yeah, as fields. So there's different. So society can be broken up into different fields. So education can be a field, like the family can be a field. Your workplace or like your profession can be a field. And then there's like the bigger fields, like the fields of politics, of laws, the things that kind of legitimate what is right and what is wrong in a kind of like collective societal level. And that intersects with all of these other, what can appear to be independent, but are very interconnected spaces. White people are racialized too, you know, but like what your race means in one space can be very different to what it means in another space. And obviously in some spaces, what our race means, we can feel completely comfortable with, to the point where it might feel to us like it means nothing. But in other spaces, it really sets us apart and it makes us feel uncomfortable, because you realize that what people are interacting with in the first instance around you is the way you look and what they think you are, not who you are, you know, and that makes you feel uncomfortable. You're kind of, you know, the rug has been pulled beneath you because you can't be yourself here. Because firstly, you need to prove that you're not who they think you are, or they want you to prove that you're not who they think you are, or you are who they think you are.
Race scripts are the product of cumulative knowledge gained through first-hand experience, observation, books, training, or social interactions, and underpin people's understanding of racializations. I can walk from one area to another and my confidence will change. And the way that I walk will change. The way that I stand will change. The way that I talk will change. And I think one of the case studies talks about it, of that code switching, that feeling of, you know, not wanting to, feeling more comfortable around his mixed race friends when he did that, because they understood that he wasn't being two-faced. He was just having to adapt, and just knowing how to adapt so quickly. But it's still you, but it's just the side of you that needs to be presented at that particular time.
Exactly. Some people spoke about their ability to kind of like know how to do that code switching, to adapt, to change the way they are, to change the way they express themselves, the kind of things they talk about. And for some people, what was really important is they really wanted other people to know that they're not changing who they are. They're just changing how they express themselves. And that can be misunderstood by some people, misrecognized as kind of like an inauthenticity or an ingenuousness in some senses, you know? So that's the element of the racialized misrecognition, when like behaviors or things that you're doing come to mean something that they're not supposed to, because there's this collective system of meaning that exists beyond you that people are reading your actions through.
Early on in life, my own battle against shyness was complicated by the fact that Black British girls don't really get to be shy. Pop culture expectations of loudness,
brashness and confidence are often folded into the fizzing mixture of our upbringings. Growing up, especially in white environments like so many of us do, in the 2011 census, making up only 3% of the UK's population, our friends might expect us to be able to twerk for them or rap all the lyrics to Ray Black's latest track in front of a crowd. At best, we are playfully viewed as performers. At worst, our blackness is used to stereotype our innocent behaviours, and teachers of other authority figures deem us rude or disinterested because of our facial expressions or actions predicted by our shyness.
Where we are at the moment, the school he would go to, the primary school he would go to, is white. Whiter than white. White. I would prefer he didn't go to that school.
Why?
Oh, who wants to be the only mixed race person, the only black person, why? That just, life is hard enough just like navigating the world without always being like the only one in that space. Like, go away. But just imagine the amount of people that want to be touching his hair, that want to be, just leave my kid alone. Like, I just don't want him to. I want him to be able to have a mix of friends. Just that mix is what I crave for him. But having said all of that, I'm fearful about his education and what that's going to look like, and what I can do to try and minimise the impact of him being seen as a black man.
In modern society, there has been a standardised association of intelligence with whiteness. Within the context of so-called race theory, the idea of there being a genetic difference between the races, reflecting itself in an intelligence gap, is an alluring justification for bigotry and racial inequality. As a result, the greater a black individual is intelligent, the greater their perceived proximity to whiteness.
On a basic level, I hate the idea of private schools. You know, I work in the NHS. Like, I'm very, the idea that you can essentially buy a better education is horrible. However, I believe that in Britain, that's what we do even in the public school sector. So if you look at, for example, in Bristol, Redland School, Redland Secondary, Redland High, whatever you call it, and the houses in their catchment area are pretty much all £1.5 million houses. We're not talking about having, though it's a state school, actually what is the class making of that school? What is it is everything everything that we say that we don't like about privately educating children. So I think when it comes to what we see in state school education, it is not fair anyway. Anyway, it's not fair because because it depends where you live.
Yeah,
it depends where you live, and that's how fair is that?
I mean, and also, that's the same inside the cities. It's also the same if you're looking at schools in the city or schools in the country.
Yeah.
Because actually they're smaller schools.
Yeah.
So the education is going to be better.
Yeah.
They're going to be less diverse.
Yes. I mean, that's the thing. So as they grow, it becomes more obvious what they need to thrive. And whether that be that actually they don't really get on well with traditional schooling in that sense. And so you need to really enrich their learning experience outside of school, or if for whatever reason they thrive more if they have one-on-one teaching, so do you need to make sure that you can have a tutor, all of these things. But I think society is interesting when we talk about schooling and private education and not. I think we fail to understand that the current education system, even if you remove private education, is based on class, is based on financial privilege. And it doesn't matter what school you go to, actually, if your parents can afford a tutor, of which many do, it's a constant.
Yeah.
It's a constant. Because I believe that the school I went to, the experiences I had, have meant that I can talk to anyone. I can be in any space, actually, because I went to the school I went to, but then I went to Bristol University, which was a very different kind of experience. And having that mixture, I think, was great for me. Because definitely when I first started Bristol Uni, I was like, well, this is different.
Yeah.
This is very different. And I'm not happy. Actually, oh God. I really was not happy. And when I think about what made me unhappy, I think actually, is it because I didn't feel there were many people like me? Is it, there's a certain judgment around those sorts of spaces? I don't want my kid to go through that.
Embodying blackness and navigating racialized fields. Ailing studied elite Nigerian parents who sent their children to UK-based boarding schools so that they could acquire British dispositions, which they believed were a highly exchangeable form of cultural capital. She discusses the ways in which people attempt to overcome the structural limitations of African heritage through the accumulation of whiteness. Her work demonstrates the global reach of the racialized social fictions that underpin Britishness. Ailing argues that the parents in her study believe that this type of schooling could help to appropriately cleanse their children of abject blackness, as though the acquisition of whiteness they would become black persons worthy of enhanced status. She suggests that whiteness and blackness are artifacts of resources, which can be used by individuals with the right kind of privilege and resources to create profitable identities, allowing them to move easily between different social spheres. This work highlights the racialized construction of capital and illustrates how other forms of capital, in this case economic, have to be used to overcome the limitations blackness imposes upon cultural capital. When economic privilege is counteracted by race, class status is complicated. Strategies that attempt to reframe blackness and maintain class status can be complicit in the process of misrecognition that give value to whiteness, as the aim is to play rather than change the game. Wallace's work on schooling in South London demonstrates the power of black diasporic knowledge and sense of belonging, illustrating how it changes the ways in which those who embody blackness negotiate fields that privilege whiteness. Distinguishing between non-dominant black cultural capital, valued in fields positioned lowly within the field of power, and dominant black cultural capital, knowledge that is valued within more dominant fields, his research illustrates how black middle-class young people use black cultural capital within education settings. Wallace illustrates the ways in which black pupils and their parents use their agency to combat the limits of their class advantage within spaces of racial domination. That is, he identifies moments where pupils use their knowledge of black history, literature, art, and processes of racialized misrecognition to re-educate their teachers, who in turn incorporate their insights into lesson planning. This demonstrates how those who feel connected with blackness are empowered both figuratively and literally, which in turn increases the value of their capital within these spaces. Pennant also demonstrates how Black girls use their sense of belonging and power within their diasporic connection to maintain a strong sense of self-pride and resilience, whilst navigating the overwhelming whiteness and inequalities embedded into the education system, making their survival possible. Whilst these actions assist the process of capital accumulation within dominant fields, they do not change the rules of the field. Thus, a level of complicity with the system of misrecognition persists. However, rather than attempting to play the game and overcome the devaluation of Blackness through accumulating whiteness in their actions, these young people are shifting the game, if only momentarily or within their own direct sphere of influence, as they are changing the value of Blackness where opportunities to do so arise. Inhabiting a body that is being negatively transformed by racialized processes of misrecognition raises an awareness of this process in a way embodying whiteness does not. This has profound existential and material consequences for Black and Black mixed race people.
It was interesting because my mum was really against private school. She'd gone to private school, she hated them. Single parent household, could not afford it at all. But there was a diversity drive. And I went in on like a half bursary, but she had to beg, borrow, steal to keep me in that school. And actually, I didn't understand the education that I was being given, in that that's not really why I was there. I wasn't really there for education. I was there for safety. And I was there to be like, at least here, I can navigate this space better because I understand it better. I'd been around my white family more than my other family. I'd been in these spaces more than I'd been in like other spaces. So I understood it. Whether or not, it still meant that I had mostly white friends, almost all white friends. And I still went through that education and came out the other side of it, with a lot of questions. But actually, that space I could adapt to a lot quicker, a lot easier. And then that was also a big question for me, because I was like, why do I feel so comfortable around white people? Why? Because I don't feel like I belong here, but I feel more comfortable here. And it was such an interesting thing. And actually, even looking back on it, the education, it was fine, it was good, but it instilled in me that idea that I was of a chosen few. Which is so gross, right?
So gross.
So gross. So even though it wasn't really about the education that I got, it wasn't really what I left with, I was like, I've been chosen to go to this school. I must be able to achieve. And that is what it instilled in me more than anything else. And that's where the whole class, race thing comes in, because it's just like, that is a whole tangled...
It's a very tangled web.
You know what I mean? So even like untangling that recently has been about going, okay, so what if this is about race? What if this is about class? What if this is about the intersectionality between the two of them? And actually, what could have been done differently? Probably nothing. Because it's just like, it just is what it is. And I think that's why it's so difficult sometimes, because you're thinking, is there an easy answer?
Oh, I wish there was an easy answer.
But there's not.
No.
There's not.
No.
Many mixed race stories refer to putting on different masks. The mixed race experience often involves performing roles determined by the racial composition of the audience. If you are full black or white, you don't have to act it to be seen as it. If you are mixed black and white, you often do. Or at least you feel like you do, which in effect means the same thing. Through conscious deliberation, self-analysis, and use of resources, participants develop strategies that enable them to cope with the everyday instances of racialized misrecognition across multiple fields. Participants develop tactics to get by which were context-dependent, psychologically draining, and more successful for those with greater economic, cultural, and social capital and resources. I want to talk a little bit as well around that idea of performance. The idea that actually, as you say, we're learning lessons in these two different worlds that we straddle all the time. And this comes from childhood, obviously, which you touch on. But I was really drawn to that element of this element that we are all performing at some level or another. And I think it was one of your case studies talking about how that performance isn't necessary in black spaces, because in black spaces, everyone is one version of colour. So you don't have to perform out of your colour because everyone's of that. Whereas when you're in more white spaces, you have to perform to the ideals of that space.
Yeah, so I think that person was talking about their experience of Black supplementary schools versus their experience of like mainstream schooling. And they were saying that the thing that they liked about Black supplementary schools was that when they were in Black supplementary school, they didn't feel that race mattered because everyone was the same. And then I think the quote is something like, so you can just be who you are. You can be intelligent or you can just be what have you. And the expectations of the space felt more connected to who you really are as opposed to who you might be because of how you look or because of these things. And so they were saying then that when they go into mainstream education settings, they feel that they are being perceived in a particular way, and there's an act that needs to be done to communicate who they really are. There's some work that they need to put in to say, you might think that because I'm a mixed race boy, I don't want to learn in this case, but actually that's not who I am because I really like school, I really like learning, and I want to do well. So there's something I have to do to you to prove to you who I am because it's not clear, because how I look confuses what you think of me, my teacher. I think I knew education was going to be a big place. I mean, it's no secret the extent to which racial inequality plays out in school, you know? So I wanted to kind of bring that to light and be like, and kind of provide a way of explaining how people who probably don't even think that they're racist and stuff kind of are complicit within these systems because it's a systematic thing that we're all a part.
Education is like a microcosm of society, but I also think that families are, especially in this scenario, because in this scenario, because I think a lot of, you know, racism comes from guilt and shame as well, you know, and the fact that people don't talk about it, especially within family, because not only do you have the family dynamics, which are always difficult, no matter how much you might love your family, there are still those family dynamics. And then you've got race on top of it. And then you've even got like, you know, you've got the race on top of it, and then you've got the internalized racism of people who are part of that family as well. So, because I don't even think it's just a case of, you know, racism being perpetuated, or prejudice maybe is a better word to use. But like, I think that anti-Blackness can come also from Black people, you know, and because it's internalized racism. So you're dealing with these two very different ideas of what Blackness is. And actually, sometimes they are the same negative connotations, but being presented in different ways. And actually, if that is also part of your race script and how you understand yourself, that is incredibly confusing.
Oh my gosh, it's so confusing.
How boring I must seem to you in comparison. A standard white girl dressed up as an African. A foolish pigmentation that was put here to confuse, but you base knowledge on appearance. So who's more the fool? Because I was making cake before dumplings, bolognese before jollof. Listening to Mali as well as Mozart, maybe that's why my accent's posh. Or maybe it's because I hopped from Harlesden to Hay on Wye, and quicker than you could bat an eye, I found myself a minority before I even knew what colour was. You know, 5 years old is a strange age to have an identity crisis. Where did I come from? Who am I? I thought I was Ngaio, but that doesn't define black or white. I'm mixed by my parents, just like you. No, you're not. You're not like us. With your brown skin and your black hair, you're not something we can trust. So I fit in the best way I know how. Adapt to my surroundings for base survival, but when I go back home, they call me country bumpkin. Disconnected. Rejected. I'm nothing. Can't grow up with a family who look like me. Feel like a class clown with the ones I do see. Wish at night that I'd wake up white, because if I did, wouldn't that make life easy? Then I wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb or have to hide so many secrets from my mum. She asks why I've stopped smiling and all I do is read. Deep into the night, I'm too scared to go to sleep. I know when I wake up it'll all start again. Teacher says I'm stupid. Stop copying. You know, I know I'm the one getting the sums right. The girl to my left knows if she copies it's all right. Because teacher knows where she comes from. Teacher knows she's a good girl. And I'm just confused, looking like a washout in pigtails. I stop crying. There's no point. It won't make them stop. Because hate is learned behaviour, and I see their parents' thoughts. Which side of the road does she walk on now? That's what it boils down to. The middle isn't an option, child. They'll straight run over you. Understand? When you're a necessity to diversity, then you're black. But when you start talking about racial inequality, nah, you need to stop that. You've got just enough white in your skin to not be considered a threat. And you speak so eloquently, we'll even grant you some respect. But don't forget where you come from, and don't see past where you're going. You can't stamp out your inner city ghetto. We see it. So stop trying.
In the logic of race, mixed race people are problematic because we muddy the picture of what would otherwise be a neatly divisible world. One where it's very clear who the we are and who the they are. There are now too many of us to be ignored as a standalone demographic force. Currently the fastest growing minority group, there are already 2 million mixed race Britons today, according to some estimates. Meanwhile, demographic projections in political scientist Professor Eric Kaufman's book, White Shift, suggest that if current rates of interracial marriage continue, and there is little reason to think they won't, Britain will be 30% mixed race by the end of this century, with that figure rising to nearly 75% by 2150.
We are, quite literally, the future.
People talk about how mixed race people have it, not even have it easier. It's not that, but there needs to be the acknowledgement of the privilege that lies within being mixed race, which some people, not everyone, some individuals can access. And like what you were saying about when you take race and class together and look and perform like an intersectional analysis, you can see how when combined with middle class resources and the concept of race scripts is helpful, race can become to be understood as something that is somebody else's problem, the problem of the onlooker, the problem of the person who's trying to hold you back, not something that something that needs to be internalized. You're not the issue. And that's a really big difference in the mindset between whether you think, oh my gosh, I need to change things about me so people can understand me better, so people don't hate me, so people aren't judging me, so I can get out who I am. I need to keep trying to find new ways to communicate because actually the body I'm in is sending out all the wrong messages. It's very different to embody that kind of race script than to embody a race script that says, oh, I haven't got time for that. I'm living my life. It doesn't make that much of a difference to me. I'm just going to keep it moving. That's your issue.
Silence keeps them comfortable, but it doesn't keep you safe. Silence protects them from themselves, but it doesn't keep you safe. Silence keeps their secrets, but it doesn't keep you safe. Silence keeps them from doing the work, because you're doing the work, because you have to do the work, because the work is the only thing that keeps you going, keeps you knowing that the future can be brighter, would be brightest if they too were fighting. This is not my journey, this is yours. This is not my learning, this is yours. This is not my reawakening, this is yours. I was forced to keep my eyes open, managed to hold the pain they saw, expected to hold that pain forever, hold it whether it broke me. My anger has not thawed, but it doesn't burn anymore. My sadness is that you're not the person you thought you were. I know who I am. I know who I've been. I know where I'm going. I know what I've seen. You cannot gaslight me. Those who occupy dominant racial positions, who live lives sheltered from racial injustices, can develop fixed race scripts grounded in their own experience as they are not exposed to events that shift their understanding of race, a privilege that those who occupy subordinate positions do not have. Everyone has different ideas about what racialization is and how it affects them and how they adapt to it and the different strategies that they use in order to overcome it, but that everyone had strategies. So regardless of whether their strategies were the same, everyone had them.
Yeah. But what was even more interesting is that even within the families, the way that people were different.
Often, mixed-race females are racialized as ambiguous and or exotic, meaning their bodies, appearance in particular, are often publicly questioned, politicized and sexualized in political encounters. Mixed race men's mixedness is often erased within racialized encounters, whilst their connection to blackness is exaggerated.
Like, for example, the family I was saying about, the mum who kind of was like very anti-racist, actively anti-racist, but also had a kind of like sometimes damaging perception of blackness that she would kind of put onto her children. So she had like a son who had experienced lots of racism. He was like the only, I'm going to say, like black person in the village, because that's how he was seen. They lived in a rural area. So his blackness, even though it was something that didn't exist at home, was very present in his day-to-day life. In comparison to his sister, who grew up in the same place, went to the same school, and kind of is like, oh yeah, I forget I'm black. I didn't really think about it. She even said, I think in one of our interviews, you know, like, we were in college and we were learning about ethnicity, and the teacher said, there's 3 people in this class that has ethnicity, which is obviously so problematic. And she was looking and she said she saw the 2 and she's thinking, who's the 3rd?
Oh my God.
So like, these are, so in the same household, you have someone who is reckoning with their blackness, what it means, trying to like overcome it and not let it define them, like really struggling with what it is to be black. And then another person who's like, oh.
One can be at once conscious of the illusion of racialized misrecognition and complicit with it. Black people embody internal divisions. Their subjectivity is rooted in performance of self, which is scripted by the colonizer. That accepts the superiority of whiteness alongside the inferiority of blackness within themselves.
Slavery created blackness. The Africans transported to America, Britain, and other parts of the Western Hemisphere as slaves arrived as members of diverse collectives who spoke different languages, believed in different things, had different customs, and considered themselves very different from each other. Slavery turned them all into black people. Since race organized everyday life in these societies, their blackness overwhelmed all the diverse identities the enslaved Africans had brought with them. Cultural genocide by redefinition. Blackness has really only ever existed where there have been many white people. Black unity where there's been systematic white oppression.
Strategically, the notion of a civilizing mission was used to rationale the Western colonization of various black indefinite populations from the 15th to the 20th century. In order to morally justify the purely economic motives for intervention, colonization had to be premised on the idea that black people were intellectually inferior to their white counterparts. The combined effect of imperialism, colonialism, and the transatlantic slave trade on the black consciousness, therefore, was to perpetuate the idea that black achievement is anomalous. This was done through highly unimaginative means, including the removal of black people from their land to try and suppress their knowledge of their culture and history, creating a global mainstream media designed to focus on white achievement and history, and building global economic and educational structures centred around whiteness. In the UK educational system, despite the utilisation of a whitewashed global history which ignores black social identity and contribution, apart from slavery, of course, let's focus on the time they were enslaved, black peoples are still achieving, yet less likely to be admitted into university despite equivalent A-level results. This distancing of blackness and intelligence hurts black individuals attempting to enter the UK's most prestigious educational institutions like Oxford, as they are disproportionately more likely to be mispredicted grades, which in itself shows they are often perceived as less capable by their teachers.
There's a very big difference between being a black male and a black female, and what that means in the world, and the uncomfortableness or the what that provokes in the other is very different. You know, the black male is so deeply stereotyped as like problematic. So he's obviously having to deal with that, and in a way, maybe her gender is protecting her from the significance of her blackness within this setting. because she's not a target of like, can I bully you? Can I overcome you? Like, don't mean you're the, like, she's not dealing with it in that way. But, you know, like I say, it's not that she's not being racialized within that village, because she talks about, I give the quote of how she says around, you know, we used to think, I had another brown friend, and we used to think, like, she thought that people didn't like us because we were brown. But I said to her, I just think it's because we're a bit ugly. And then as we got old, we had bushy hair and all of these things. And then she says, like, as we got older and we kind of trimmed up, and we weren't like the skinny blonde girls, but, you know, eventually they saw us as something, you know, a bit exotic, something a bit spicy, and they quite liked us because of that, you know. And that's like so racialized in its sentiment. But for her, that was nothing to do with race. She didn't understand that through the prism of race or racialization. She understood that to do with like the prism of getting breasts and boobs as she like progressed into teenagehood, or like she dealt with her bushy hair and looked better because of that. Like, it wasn't racialized for her.
And I think with that same person, when she talks about having her first racial experience, it was at university, but by then it was with the people from the Black community, like saying, you know, oh, it seemed like they hated me, but then they still wanted to get with me, talking about the guys. And I just thought, wow.
About how they, like, her peers broke down what colorism was, and like, because she was light skinned, she was like above this person, and she's never had open conversations about race at all, really. They didn't really speak about it at home, other than to say that racism is bad. So she's having these like conversations. She gets put in a place with, like, I think she has like 5 Black housemates, like from like Caribbean and African backgrounds. So like, I think she's living with quite a diverse set of like people that have really different experiences of race themselves, and they kind of break. And like, also, I think a few of the people she lives with are from London. And like I said, she's from like a rural village. So she's like, they had explained to her what lighty is, and like that she's this lighty and what that means. And she's like, whoa, how have I just walked into this situation? And all of a sudden, what I look like seems to be defining who talks to me, how they talk to me, what they're expecting of me. It was too much for her. She's like, I just need to go home to my village where nobody talks about this. Because that feels much better. Then it doesn't matter. But actually, these conversations around colorism, these conversations about racism, and that's really stressing me out, because I feel like you're making this into a much bigger deal than it needs to be.
The thing is, colorism has been discussed for years and years and years and years, but I think it's coming to the fore, I guess, now people are well, the internet, now race has become something that actually people are discussing more and more.
Well, I think now people are discussing colorism more as well, because, and it's just my opinion, but because there's more mixed race people. So like now,
interesting,
there's more of us to be able to say, this is really messed up and it's got nothing to do with us. Interesting. I think those types of complex conversations are happening more now, because we're all of an age where we have the language
100%
to be able to say, this isn't what we're trying to
but create. also because we're all confused, right? So honestly, the amount of times I see these celebrities, these racially ambiguous celebrities, where I'm like, I mean, for years I thought Rita Ora was mixed race. For years.
Yeah.
Okay, so this, like, they put themselves in this, like, in this racially ambiguous box, the same as Ariana Grande, who is whiter than white. You know, literally. She's white. So why does she look like she's not white? They do it on purpose. And it proves to me, it proves what they believe to be the top of that hierarchy. The same as the Kardashians, all of them, you know, because it's wanting the proximity to blackness without being fully black. You know, that's you know.
It's one of the cool bits of the culture without actually having to deal with.
I mean, even edges are just, you know, just go away. Stop it. You know, it just, or things that I used to get bullied about as a kid that are now really cool. Like,
I think that's the most annoying part of it. It's like, actually, there's had to be a lot of self-love drilled into our own brains to get over all of the things we used to be bullied about, and now it's cool.
It's bizarre.
Now it's injections.
Honestly,
bum injections.
I was rinsed mercilessly. Like, it's bizarre.
I push my head back, but it won't lie flat like those other girls do. The ones that wear their hair with flair like I wanted to. And now they're looking down their noses, pointing like I belong. I feel a weight on my shoulders because that's where I'm supposed to be. Oh, my caramel skin don't sound easy. I'm just a little darker than what they want me to be. I couldn't choose to be anything but me, but I wanted to. Felt the grieving building inside, being pulled into. My feet straddling the line, sinking deeper still. But the battle inside my mind won't be quiet, so it gets louder, louder. My caramel skin don't sound easy. I can't stop myself enough to be treated equally. My caramel, who wants caramel? Buy my caramel, sweet like caramel. Rot your teeth, caramel.
In the career of humanity, we have always divided ourselves into in-groups and out-groups. The only things that change with time are the labels and the logic of division. We used to have Romans and Aztecs, now we have Italians and Mexicans. We used to divide into kingdoms and religions, now we divide into nations and races. We also divide into classes, ethnic groups, ideological tribes, and countless other in-groups and out-groups we've invented. Perhaps this century will bring new types of human divisions we can't even imagine today, but for now, social construct or not, race is a popular basis for human divisions. What matters is what people believe matters.
You grew up very much inside your identity, as in you grew up in a house that was, with your parents, with your brother and sister in London. You could get everything that you needed in order to kind of like feed the culture that was in your home.
100%.
Whereas, not everyone has that.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's sometimes where the mixed race experience can be different, in that unless you are surrounded by that compoundment of your identity, with the people that you have around you, with the area that you're in, with the way that your house, all these different things, then actually those questions are going to come up a lot quicker.
But I think that even if you are surrounded by your identity, I think when you go back to Ghana, Nigeria, wherever you're from, you very much feel the outsider. And I mean, I feel the outsider when I'm in Ghana, because they're like, oh God, she's not really one of us because she's born and bred over there. She thinks differently to us, So I think there's there's that feeling of, well, where do you belong? And I think that's hard, whatever household you grow up in.
How was that for you? Kind of, did you feel that immediately when you were going to Ghana, or was there sort of moments where you were like, oh, actually, because you went back a lot, didn't you? Like,
yeah. I mean, I always felt different because simply it's a bit like when you go on holiday anywhere, people are looking at you, right? They're looking at you because they don't feel that you're one of them. Same thing happens in Ghana, right? They're looking at you because they know you're not one of them. To them, they feel very much like, okay, she's got black skin, fine, but still, there's still something about her that is different to me. And that is hard, you know. My parents were great in that they, you know, in the household, they spoke Hausa, which is a language in northern Ghana, northern Nigeria. So we could understand, we could speak, although they would laugh at us because our...
Can you speak Hausa?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know.
Okay.
Because when we used to, or when we try to, people would laugh at us because our accent's different, and you know, and so you feel you want to stop trying. Then you're like, well, boy, like you're laughing at me, so let me just wipe my neck in here.
Are you gonna teach Bobby Hausa?
You know, I would love to, but on if I'm being 100% honest, I didn't learn Hausa. I was immersed in it. So my parents spoke Hausa to one another. They spoke Hausa to us from early. But the problem is, Hausa is actually a really broad language in that you can speak Hausa in northern Ghana, speak Hausa in northern Nigeria, and they're completely different.
They are not the same language. Yeah.
And that is why, actually, unless you're immersed in it, it's very difficult. So you can, you know, I would love to, but in all honesty, I think it's going to be really difficult. We are going to make sure that Bobby, you know, summer holidays, mate, you're going to be in Ghana for at least 4 weeks. See you later.
I wish that I'd even had some phrases, just to be able to understand when I was there, how to say hello, how to say thank you, just how to be respectful.
Or just know when people are absolutely mugging you off.
Do you know what I mean? Also that, to be able to be like, yo, please.
That happens to us so many
times. More like it. If someone's completely taken me for cleaners. Exactly.
Yeah, that happened to me in a market before in Ghana. And it was like, thing is, I can understand you.
Yeah, this is it. And for me, I'm just going, Auntie Sharon's just going, don't speak. She's like, don't speak. You're not holding the money. They need to know that I'm in charge. Yeah. You don't know what's going on. Yeah. And I'd be like, real talk. I don't know what's happening. You're so right. You are so right.
So yeah, I think anyone who's born outside of their country will feel an element of that. It just depends to what extent
and how much it stops you from being connected to the place. And it's a funny one, isn't it? Because I think there's this problem with this country is that it kind of groups black people, mixed race people together. It's like, boom, there you are. And it's like, well, actually, we're from all over the world, and when we go home, it's not just about being black. And here everything's been made to be so much, you are black, you are mixed race, like that is your whole identity, and that's just not true. So it's like this idea that you're going to go home and suddenly this is where I've always meant to be, because no, you're British. You've grown up in Britain, regardless of what skin colour you are. That is a part of who you are. So it's it's a really interesting thing, I think, especially for me when I went back to Nigeria as well. Because in my head, I was like, I'm about to go home. And for me, that was the first time I'd ever gone.
These roots I'm flying back to, I never tried to give up. Sometimes questioned the often mentioned that would never come unstuck. I'll be landing in the country that whispers to my own. A sister, a brother, a father, a home. I see myself with eyes open wide, smelling with intention, locking in memories as they fade, looking out into the open, eyes glazed, using my most useful function as ancestors dance around my imagination. I'll walk around in my kente cloth, but I want to smell the sun of the fibres, want to picture the woman who sold it, see others in my memory when I chose it, know the story inside out of how I found it, feel wrapped up in Africa when I wear it. Finally, it's time to dip a toe in these unknown waters and see the motherland without a screen, match a picture with this culture embedded in me, to understand who I am a little better, hopefully. Hopefully. Hope. For me.
Most of the mixed race Britons I spoke to visited ancestral homelands only to find they were questioned there as well. The realization that there really isn't anywhere you will never be questioned is a painful one. It's the tragedy of the diaspora, especially the mixed race diaspora, to be questioned everywhere.
And I think that was really reflected in the thesis, in people's, like, how they spoke about their futures, right? For some people, like, their future self, they imagined, they could clearly say, I'm going to be here, I'm going to have this career, I'm going to bought a house, I'm going to be, like, in this really secure position, I imagine, in 5 years' time. And other people were like, I mean, okay, I've got like 3 degrees, I know I'm doing really good, I've got a good job, but actually I also know that because that I am, like, black or black mixed race, this could be taken away from me at any minute. And so I can't say I'm going to firmly be anywhere, because who knows what my blackness is going to mean in my future, the impact it's going to have on my future. Versus that I hope to be living outside of this system of racialization. I want to escape to a place where I can just be me. So in 5 years' time, I hope that I'm living in this land that I don't know, where my race doesn't matter. I don't know where it is. Like, I think they say maybe it's Ghana or what have you, but they want to go to that place where they can be more than their race. You know, so people's understanding of themselves and where they see themselves going seem to be really connected to how they were racialized and the ways in which they were able to navigate that and to feel like they had agency within these circumstances.
The same thing as you were talking about with colorism is that I really quickly realised that I could do really well here, but not for the right reasons. You know, I could really come here and be flashing around this light skin. I'm from Britain.
Right, they love it,
and it's really it's difficult to then reconcile what you're going home for.
What we perceive to be success so often depends on institutions that are intimately linked to capitalism, white supremacy, and the ongoing oppression of the global south, all of which we, as members of a global diaspora, have a very different relationship with to our white peers. Whenever we make gains in visibility and representation, we simultaneously risk losing our integrity and political grit, as we become thriving parts of systems that have betrayed us and our communities since their inception. All of this rubs up against our own desire for financial security and our own personal ambitions and dreams.
I always say that I'd like to live in Nigeria at some point, but fashioning how that's going to happen,
I feel that,
in a way that is not going to feel really exploitative of this system is difficult.
But it's not your, it's not on you, it's not, no. It's, you know, it's, that is years, that is historic, that is, you know, bleaching culture, and God, it is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking. And even if you, I just don't know when or how it will change. Because it's so, I mean, you know, when I was last in Ghana, you can see that's adverts,
billboards,
like
huge.
You know, come and use this. Skin. It'll brighten your skin. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, just.
Yeah.
It's mad. It's mad, and you'll never hear a compliment on your skin unless you're mixed race or lighter skinned.
That was really difficult, I think, for me when I was in Nigeria, because I've always grown up being in complete adoration of darker skin, because I grew up in a space where there was no dark people. So I was like, whenever I saw images or anything, I was like, that to me was the epitome of beauty and of acceptance, really, of like sort of probably self-acceptance, because I was like, there, look how beautiful that is.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard and it's complicated, but I do think it's really relevant when we're talking about children of interracial relationships, and what that means for them, and what that looks like as they navigate the world.
And I think we'll end it there, because I don't think we could have wrapped up any better. I really hope that this piece has gone some way to helping you to navigate the world that you're in, whether you are mixed race, black, white, whatever, however you define yourself. I hope this has been an interesting listen. I hope it's made you feel seen, created a bit of context and some insight. And thank you so much to everybody who has been a part of this. Thank you to Annabelle Wilson for writing the PhD. Thank you to Aisha Gala for being the absolute don that you are. Little Bobby, oh God, I'm going to smother you with love. No. Thank you to Will Taylor, who read out bits from Black and British and Biracial Britain, and Ngaio Anyia, who read out excerpts from Loud Black Girls, and Tom Hackwell, who has edited this. And don't Google it. Who were the people who commissioned me to put it together in the first place? It's been a real journey putting this together. Sometimes it's been difficult, but I really am so thankful to have had the space and time to digest the last year and create something out of it, to read and write and think and discuss a subject which is so close to my heart and is an ongoing journey that I'm really growing to love.
Shine away every time they heard her say, what a surprise. She's dancing like she doesn't realize, like her body doesn't hypnotize. Who cares what they say? She's not dancing for them anyway. Hail Mary, oh, she had to break free. They didn't understand. They called her Hail Mary, 'cause she doesn't go quietly. Her words